Characters are kind of the bedrock of all stories, aren't they? I don't know that there is such a thing as a story without characters, unless the universe itself counts as a character, and if so, somebody really ought to ask him how he's doing every now and then. It probably gets lonely being literally everything, and plus, he's put on a few kilograms over the last 2 billion years, so I doubt he's going out as much as he used to. I'd recommend he hit the gym, but what with all gyms being inside of his bulbous mass, I don't know if that's really a realistic option. Don't tell him that I called him bulbous. If characters are the reason why we partake in stories, I don't think it would be a stretch to say that creating good characters, whatever that means, is essential to good storycraft. Even though this fact seems self-evident, I don't know that I've ever been able to identify a set of unchanging essential elements to good character writing. One of the most often cited pieces of writing advice is that characters must change over the course of a narrative. By story's end, a character can't be the same person they were at the beginning, lest the reader or viewer wonder why they even tagged along for the adventure. After all, character development is good, right? We like it when characters are forced to reassess their values and grow as a result. Plus, most good stories feature characters who change, so surely character development is essential to good stories. Being the self-aggrandizing and contrarian prick that I am, I kinda don't agree with this perspective. And it's not just because I myself am incapable of changing and therefore believe that the world should accommodate my shitty habits. No, it's definitely not that. My answer to the question of whether characters must change for their story to be compelling would be the following. Probably, but not necessarily, so therefore no. Does that make sense? I think it does, and if it doesn't, I'd say that's on you. I mean, why should I have to explain myself? If you're still confused, which is probably perfectly reasonable, allow me to clarify. Characters probably ought to change, but they don't have to. Seems like a dull statement, doesn't it? You're not the only one perplexed by it. I just said it and I don't even fully understand it. How about we work through it together? And by that, I mean, I'll work through it and you'll sit there and do nothing. Lazy pieces of crap. Most good stories feature characters who change. I feel quite comfortable in saying this. However, the fact that there exist good stories in which the main character is static would mean that it's not exactly a hard and fast rule, right? Surely the existence of static characters in good stories is enough of a reason not to lend too much credence to the suggestion that characters must change, or at least not so much credence that one might throw away an otherwise interesting story simply because the main character doesn't learn anything by the end. Most sitcoms feature static characters, and I don't think I'm comfortable with committing to the position that sitcoms are inherently inferior to dramas. And if the counter-argument is that comedy adheres to different qualitative rules, then maybe this advice just isn't very helpful. Stories are modeled after life, and life is a comedy. You know, unless your existence is comprised of the perpetual passing of kidney stones. And even then, I suppose the clearest example of a static character remaining compelling to follow nonetheless would be Homer Simpson, who I'd consider to be a pretty strong television character, more so than many other characters who grew and changed over the course of their stories. He's well defined, which I think is inherently more interesting than being banal and simply learning equally banal lessons. What's interesting about Homer Simpson is that if he were a real person, there wouldn't really be that much about him to admire. Though he is a fundamentally good guy, he's lazy, oafish, and downright negligent, and despite having been routinely challenged, he's never permanently changed for the better. Yet Homer is still compelling to watch, and the moments in which he demonstrates himself to be more complicated than the stereotype he's based off are some of the most powerful moments in any show. Even if we watch it knowing that the next episode will serve as a hard reset on any potential character development. Master Chief from Halo is another, perhaps more apt example of a static character present in a good story. He's not much of a character at all in the original games, but the Halo trilogy is still tightly written. The Arbiter changes for sure, but most of the game's characters don't, and really, the story is carried by a strong plot and great world building more so than characters who change or grow. And putting all of this to one side, characters choosing not to change is valid, at least as far as I'm concerned. What if they were right all along? What if the point of the story is that they're unwilling to confront their deepest failings? I sometimes wonder if our desire to see characters change is tethered to our own desire to change. Maybe it's just easy to transpose our real-world ambitions against fictional characters whom we'd like to model ourselves after. The question then becomes whether our character judgments are synonymous with the quality of a fictional character, but that's a topic for another day, and probably another 10,000 discussions. So, What does this all mean? I guess what I'm getting at is the rule which states that characters must change for a story to be good isn't true universally, and thus it isn't really a rule at all, but rather a suggestion merely worth considering. I like to think that viewing it this way means there's at least one less restriction on what a writer can or can't do when crafting a story. Then again, I'm not exactly Tolkien, so I might be completely wrong about this, but when have I ever been wrong? Actually, don't answer that.